Hi, my name is Ethan Owens. I'm a technical sports scientist for Catapult in the North American region, and today we're going to do an online workshop titled Integrating IMA Data into Your Daily Reports. To give you an outline of what we're going to cover today, we're going to go over what exactly is IMA. A lot of our newer clients or clients that have been with us for a long time still might not know exactly what IMA is, what it stands for, what we can get out of IMA. So we're going to touch base on that a little bit today. We're going to go on to the benefits of IMA. There's a lot of data that we can actually get from the IMA data. I think it's really important that we cover off on what exactly the IMA gives us and how we can use that data to further our development of our athletes and manage fatigue. Then we're going to switch gears and go over ways to incorporate IMA. And really, we're just going to break down into different reports and some example graphs. Really, my goal here is to show you some things that I've helped our clients graph with IMA, or I've seen and gotten ideas for this presentation. And really, I just want to throw some ideas out here as my goal. Basically, if you're graphing IMA, maybe I can stimulate some thought on your end, or show you some different ways that our clients have used IMA and some other graphs to incorporate. Then we're going to go into some considerations for graphing IMA, and really what we're just going to touch on are some basic principles of creating dashboards and having good graphs. And then we'll wrap it up. So what exactly is IMA? It actually stands for Inertial Movement Analysis. It's just way easier to say IMA. It's actually, and what it is, it's an algorithm that uses an advanced Kalman filtering technique, and it combines our 3D accelerometer and our gyroscope within the monitor to build a gravity model that enables the subtraction of gravity vector. I know that sounds really complicated, but basically what that means is it corrects the monitor orientation to allow true movement of the athlete irrespective of the positioning. And I'm just going to briefly elaborate on that using this stick figure here to the right of the paragraph. And if we have our phone lying face down or flat on the surface, gravity is actually acting on that at 9.8 meters per second squared. And what we can see is not only does gravity act on our monitor, but if we are accelerating, what we see is we get a false acceleration of 0 to 7.8 meters per second squared because of the effect of gravity and the ability of the monitor not to detect what is actually happening. Whereas IMA, we use an algorithm to build the gravity vector, or subtract the gravity vector, and what we get actually is a real forward acceleration of 0 to 4 meters per second squared. So all in all, what IMA does is it detects orientation and removes the gravity vector, so we get true movement of the athlete. So just to take that a step further, basically what IMA does is it allows you to track athlete performance without GPS. Not saying GPS isn't a great benefit to what we provide, because things like speed and distance covered, high intensity running, those are all incredibly important. However, IMA gives you some micro movement analysis and the ability to look at some other things that GPS can't detect. So we use the inertial sensors again to touch base, the accelerometers, which detect change of motion, and gyroscopes, which detect rotation, to measure micro movements of the athlete. We use the term micro movements because IMA assesses anything that the GPS would miss out. So for example, if I am a basketball player and I'm at the top of the key and I take a quick jab step to the right, GPS might miss that. Or similar, if I'm a soccer player and I go drive to my right 1 or 2 steps, GPS might miss that. IMA uses a high-level mass and the Kalman filtering to actually convert the accelerometer and the gyroscope traces into true movement of the body, not movement of the monitor itself. And this is converted into meters per second squared. And so again, to elaborate on that, just a quick little stick figure drawing that I did here to the right. Whereas if I'm on the 50-yard line and I'm facing the right sideline and I plant my right foot and I change direction and I end up facing the goal, one of the goals. I've actually changed my direction, but GPS is only going to say that I had an acceleration because I changed velocity, but what I really did was change my orientation. And so GPS can only give you point A to point B accelerations or decelerations with no regard to orientation. IMA recognizes that change in orientation and would pick that up as a change of direction, not an acceleration. So I want to do IMA justice because it's a really complicated algorithm, and I won't spend a ton of time on here, but I just wanted to give respect to our developers who created IMA. So what we get is the raw data input, which is the 100 Hertz triaxial accelerometer and triaxial gyroscope data. And what that does is that gives us a coordinate system, and then that's put through the filter, and then the real acceleration or change of direction, the orientation of the athlete is based on the coordinate system coming off the raw data. And what we can get indoors and outdoors, which is really important because we won't miss data if we're tracking accelerations outdoors and we go inside. Now we have the ability to not miss that data once we go inside. And what we get out of IMA are acceleration, deceleration, and change of direction counts in low, medium, and high effort bands or zones, whatever term you prefer there. And then as well as we get a free running event and a jump count broken down into low, medium, and high bands. And those low, medium, and high bands are 0 to 7.87 inches, 7.87 to 15.76 inches, and then anything greater than or equal to 15.76 inches. And what that gives us the ability to do is quantify information on a local level, on a micro movement, as I mentioned before, level. And we can also split that data by period. So the benefits of IMA, great insight into athlete movement, is now we have the ability to know, instead of just accelerations and decelerations, we're able to calculate things like changes of directions, decels, accelerations, and jumps. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on free running. If you are interested in that, please email me after the. My email is at the end of the slide, and we can discuss that further. One of the other benefits of IMA over, say, GPS is it actually has a faster sampling rate. The sensors sample at 100 Hertz, where the GPS engine actually samples at 10 Hertz. So it could be more sensitive to some of the micro movements that our athletes, especially in tight quarters, occur. And then again, can't stress this enough, available indoors and outdoors. So if you were tracking changes of directions or decelerations, and you wanted to do that outdoors, you can also get that data indoors. So we don't lose that ability to track micro measurement athlete movement before IMA. So this is our sprint report IMA. Our IMA report here, this is our original IMA report. Our new software, OpenField, we can do a lot of different things with this, but I just wanted to show you an IMA PDF report that we get. We get a table and a radar plot. The radar plot gives us total low, medium, and high intensity movements broken down into 4 sections over a 360-degree radius. I'll touch base on that in a minute. But the table gives us an actual period per period breakdown, so we can see the amount of accels, decels, change of directions, and jumps each period and for the session. So this PDF gives us the amount of low, medium, and high IMA movements for the first half, the second half, and then the sum of all of them, which is the session data. And then the radar plots are for the session, and they show each movement in clock, 12 hands, and it is auto-scaled, and each represents the direction of force applied. So for example, if I have an athlete that plants their right foot and changes the direction to the left, that's a direction. The direction of the force is going towards the left, hence the IMA movement would be towards the left. So that's something to keep in mind, and we'll elaborate on that real quick. So that radar plot can be analyzed a little bit further, and we see here that we've got 12 30-degree segments simplified basically into a clock that's been divided into 4 categories. So an acceleration, a deceleration, a left and a right change of direction. And again, it's all dependent on the direction of force. So to my knowledge, there's no athlete that can karaoke faster than they can plant their foot and turn. So if I plant my left foot and I change my direction to the right, the direction of force is going to the right, so that would register as a right change of direction. And this is where some of our users are looking at asymmetrical loading, which I'll show you some graphs here as we get into the presentation. But just keep that in mind that IMA is based off the direction of force and the orientation of the athlete. Incorporating IMA into your daily reports. This is just a basic general report that one of our users has done for their coach, and it just shows the number of high XLs, the high decels, and the high jumps. It's very rudimentary, but for a coach that's maybe never seen data, this is a great way to show a coach, this guy had this many high jumps, this many high decelerations, this many high accelerations. There's not a lot of complication to it. It's very simple. You can see here player 7 had the most jumps, whereas player 8 had the most decelerations, player 7 had the most accelerations. It's not something that you can make long-term changes with, but it's a great snapshot to give your coach after a practice or a session, and it's a really simple way to start incorporating reports into your coach's daily routine. Switching gears on that, we can make IMA as part of a section or sections of data for a daily team report. So what this graph shows is the positions for a day for 1/13/2015. We've got on the top left, we've got player load and a player load per minute, so I have volume and an intensity type metric. Number of high accelerations and decelerations, number of jumps in each band, and then the number of change of directions in each band. So we have left and right change of direction in the low, medium, and high bands. To touch base real quick, the bottom left graph and then the bottom left graph on the other quadrant here, they're the same data points, just graphed differently. And I'll touch base on that when we talk about some ideas and guidelines for building your dashboards and your reports. In any case, this is a great representation of IMA data that we can get and we can give to a coach. Again, it's a daily snapshot of, coach, this person had this much, this person had this much. It's a great summary of what happened for the session for the coach. Taking that a step further, so we could do a positional breakdown. So this is a positional breakdown for a team on 3/17/2015. And again, it's a great snapshot for a position. And one thing that is really easy to understand is we can change our center midfield, our forward, our inside back. These could be player names or these could be dates. So you could change these graphs to look at a snapshot for a day for position for the whole team, or this could be the last 5 days of the week leading into a Saturday game, and this could be dates for a team, or this could be dates for one player. So just keep that in mind that these can be changed, but I'm not comfortable sharing any of our team's data by name, so this is all de-identified. There's no names on any of our graphs that we're going to examine today. In any case, this is a position breakdown whereby we're looking at player load, total distance covered versus high intensity running, max speed, EDI, which is a measure of explosiveness, and then changes of direction. And so all of these graphs, except for the change of direction, are based off GPS data, but IMA is your change of direction data. So we can look at what is our total changes to the left versus changes to the right. And some of that will clearly change depending on what type of sport you're playing, where you're lined up, and I see this in football a lot. If you're wide out and you line up on the left all the time, the middle of the field is going to be towards your right, so you're going to have more change of directions to the right as compared to the left. And some of our users have found this to be beneficial when planning things for recovery or strength training, maybe not correcting the asymmetry, but trying to reduce its expression a little bit. So the same thing, this is the same graph that we looked at previous slide, only this is for a forward over the first part of this year. So this is a forward report for all of 2015 thus far. The same variables, distance, player load, max velocity, EDI, which again was a measurement of explosiveness, total distance versus high intensity running, and then IMA is incorporated as the change of direction data. So again, this user finds a lot of value in all of our GPS data, but they still like the change of direction data to look at some of those micro movements that are occurring. And what this graph shows for the change of direction is instead of breaking the change of directions down by each band, they just summed all of the left and all of the right change of directions and called it total left and total right. And there's all kinds of unique things that our users have done for IMA. Some of our users have summed up IMA and called them all the low band IMA movements, called them total low IMA movements. Same for the medium and the high. Some of our users have taken their IMA data and expressed it as a percentage. So if we have 5 low XLs, 5 medium XLs, and 5 high XLs, they'll take the low and express that as a percentage of the total accelerations. So 5 divided by 15, 33%. So some really interesting ways. I'm happy to discuss some of those with you in an email, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that there's a lot of different ways that people are incorporating IMA and using them in your reports. So taking this a step further and looking at IMA as part of a team analysis, keeping on this same team and the same trend is, instead of breaking those graphs down by day for one player or by position, we're giving the coach, sorry about that, a snapshot of the entire day as a team. So instead of breaking that out by position or by individual, this is just a snapshot for the coach to look at each day what's happened for our team. And we can see that on 110 max velocity for the team was the highest. That also was the highest for the total distance. It was the highest for player load. It was the highest for EDI. So we can look at that and build a periodization model off that from a general standpoint. Taking it a step further with IMA is looking at reflecting the agility volume per period. So this is some basketball data where we're looking at first, second, third, and fourth quarters. The session is all of those data points summed together, and then looking at low, medium, and high movements per quarter as a stacked column graph. And so what we're seeing here, really interesting, is that the first and the third quarter, there's a higher player load and a higher player load per minute. On the same note, there's more low and medium and high IMA movements per quarter than there is in the second and fourth quarter. So this is not broken down by a position or an individual. This is just a reflection of the team. We could obviously break that down a little further to get more exclusive into our data and the interrogation of the data, but for this presentation, hopefully, like I said, this just gives you some ideas on how you could use IMA. And what is interesting, again, is looking at why the second and the fourth quarter, they're so much lower in everything compared to the first and the fourth. Interestingly, that's the start of the game and the start of after halftime. So the second and the fourth quarter, you at least have to ask, well, are we running out of steam? So just an interesting graph that you can show, are we able to keep explosiveness throughout the game? Taking the data into a different route and graphing it a different way are with these really interesting spider charts. And what I've done is I've taken all of the high IMA movements, the high XLs, high change of direction to the left, high change of direction to the right, high decelerations, and high jumps. And I've graphed our game demands for this team by position. So this is just an average of all the games for each of these positions. And what we can get is an idea of what are the game demands, what is demanded of our team in a game. And what we see here is the forward guard has more demands than any other player. They have higher XLs, they have higher change of directions, higher decels, and more jumps than any other player. And then, interestingly enough, we see that our forward center is second in change of direction to the left into the decels, but not XLs, jumps, and right change of directions. So we could clear this graph up and we could graph, let's just say, centers and forward centers, but I wanted to just show you the idea that we can get all of our true game demands on a graph for all our positions. Something else that we can do here is standardize our reporting and compare our positions against a high-level person. So what this graph here has done is it's comparing different positions to an NBA MVP. I've standardized the MVP, and he's 100, and then what is our comparison to our other positions relative to that MVP. And what we see here is that the MVP is significantly greater in player load and change of directions in basically every category except high jump count. That goes to the forward guard. After that, the forward guard actually is the second in terms of every other variable except for jumps. And then from there, it's kind of a wash. It changes by player. But it's really interesting if this is where you could start benchmarking things, where say you have a five-star guy, or he's your best player in that position, and that's your 100%. That's what you want all of the guys under him to be able to compete at or be able to have that type of performance. So being able to standardize him as 100 and then comparing the rest of your guys to him is something that some of our users have done. And it's a really easy concept for a coach to see. Something else you could do with IMA is you can make Z-scores. So this is a daily Z-score for a forward from 12/3/2013 to 1/3/14. And what this shows us is how far off are each day for our total IMA from the average. And what we see here is most days are well above 100%, except for a few. Some are actually well below 0. So it gives a good idea for a coach of what has happened that day, how much harder have they exerted themselves relative to their average, their norm. And if you remember the bell curve, and you have 50%, and then you have 1 and 2 standard deviations, and then 3 standard deviations from the bell curve, and a z-score represents the bell curve. And this graph is a clear indication that the majority of our days, these forwards, are at around 100% or above most days. This doesn't take into account things like games or things like that, but for sake of this conversation, it's a good representation to show what type of work has been done. Taking IMA a step further into actual performance in wins versus losses. So these three graphs, they show player load, high intensity movements by quarter of wins versus losses, and then jumps by quarter of wins versus losses. Interestingly enough, the player load per minute, the high intensity movements, and the high jumps are actually higher when this team wins versus when they lose. So this is just a great example to actually tie in catapult data to true performance. We could also take our IMA data and we can compare practice versus a game. So this is another really rudimentary graph, but something that hopefully sparks some interest from you all listening to this. This just compares the average number of explosive movements for a practice versus a game for the last 3 years. And what we've seen is 2013, the game had more high explosive movements. That wasn't the same in 2014 and 2015. So it's a great way to show a coach possibly think about changing some structures in practice. That way we can have a better periodization plan. Switching gears here and doing some considerations for graphing. And this isn't just necessarily IMA, this is for when you're making any type of dashboard. And I've taken some of my ideas here from Mladen Jovanovic, Ravi Ramanini with the Seattle Sounders, and just some other things I've read from some dashboard books using Excel. And the one thing that I've really started to understand is to know your coach, know your audience. What do they prefer? Are your coaches, are they table people and numbers people? Are they graph people? And what type of graph? What kind of visual do they prefer? And if we go down to the bottom here in this table and these two graphs, these all represent the same data set. This table is equal to the middle graph, which is equal to the far right graph. But what I wanted to show you here and convey is that the graphs want to be representative of the point you're trying to get across. And that's where the KISS rule really comes into effect, is that good data visualization gets the point across quickly. And that's where, again, knowing your coach and what type of visual do they prefer. Because some people really like the middle graph, the stacked column graph, whereas other people like the far right graph and they like the clustered column graph. So knowing your audience is key. And in that, something that a lot of our clients have started to do a really good job of is asking the question of what to their coach, what question can I answer for you? What are we wanting to get out of this data? Is it to see who's performing well, who has significant fatigue over time? So being able to visualize that is key. So to summarize, incorporating IMA into your data reports, IMA means inertial movement analysis. It comes from the algorithm coming from accelerometers and gyroscopes, and it allows us to detect accelerations, decelerations, left and right change of directions, jumps, and free running events. Can't stress this enough. It's available indoors and outdoors, so you get data that you would get outdoors, indoors. And it may provide greater insight due to the greater sampling frequency and the ability to detect athlete orientation. And to summarize, the ability to incorporate your IMA into your daily reports, keep in mind that you can do daily team, position, individual snapshots, or you can do team, position, individual analysis longitudinally. It's all on how you want to represent the data and what point you're trying to get across. I really appreciate your time and thanks for listening. If you have questions about the presentation or some different graphs that I showed you or things that I talked about within the presentation, feel free to hit me up at ethan@catapultsports.com. If you have feedback for the workshop, please email our marketing director, Bowden Westover, and his email is there. Thanks for your time.